Hi, I'm Victoria Stevens, and welcome to this podcast, Stock Exchanges. In my day job, working as a fund manager at Liontrust, investing on behalf of our clients in UK stock market listed companies, I'm fortunate enough to cross paths with some of Britain's most inspiring entrepreneurs. It's a huge privilege to sit across the table from the people who have put their heart and soul into growing and running these companies. And in this series, I want to share that privilege with you, our listeners. Today is a special day for the podcast. We're back with a new episode, and this episode is the first time that we've recorded live in front of a studio audience. It was recorded at King's Place in North London in November with my guest, Andrew Denton, the CEO of Alfa Financial Software plc. I really hope you enjoy the live format. So, a very warm welcome to Andrew, who's the Chief Executive of Alfa Financial Software, which is a FTSE 250 business providing enterprise software to the asset financing industry. And Alfa's software, very briefly, supports the full life cycle of asset financing, from the origination of the loans through invoicing, payments and collections, all the way through to end of lease, remarketing and disposal of assets. And it's used across multiple countries, currencies, languages, from assets as diverse as cars to cranes. It's software which, and I love this phrase, Andrew's described to me before as the heart and lungs of his customers' operations. So it's really critical to ensuring the smooth running of their operations, and it's really deeply embedded in what they're doing day to day. And Andrew has just celebrated 30 years at Alfa, having joined as a computer science graduate in 1995. Back to that equity ownership mentality and culture. He and the chairman, Andrew Page, still own over half of the business between them. So thank you so much, Andrew, for agreeing to join our conference today to give us an insight into the entrepreneurial journey so far.
Pleasure.
And what you're excited about that's yet to come. So I thought we would start, if that's okay with you, if I could ask you to just give 1 or 2 minutes, just as a kind of elevator pitch, if you like, of the business. What makes Alfa special?
Well, you've kind of already done it for me, haven't you? Good afternoon. Victoria promised me an intimate chat, and for slightly misled with just a couple of hundred friends in the room, but we'll do our best for you. You said a lot about it. Alfa is very much a heart and lungs solution. We operate in this thing called the asset finance market, so we're very much aligned to a particular sector. Spending a lot of time in the States recently, so I say niche, but it's a big niche. Spends about $3.5 billion every year on software and related services, and we are comfortably the number one player within that market with I'll be well behaved today, 125 million consensus. And I know I've conflated two currencies in that, but you can see there's a lot of runway there. We absolutely have the best technology. We have the best functionality. We run across 37 countries, and we're quite big these days. But one of the areas that I hope we're going to explore a little bit today, this idea of culture, because you can do technology, you can do functionality, but actually the thing that we really, really major on, and we are an expensive date, we're very much a differentiated sale. The thing that we major on is our ability to deliver, and we're only able to deliver because of the strength of our culture. So I sincerely believe us to be a purpose-driven business, which you don't often hear in the for-profit sector.
And we're absolutely going to get into those cultural aspects. But I wonder whether or not you can just give us a bit of insight into your history with the business. So let's take you back to when you were a fresh-faced graduate 30 years ago. You know, what did the first part of your career look like? How did you end up at Alfa?
I wasn't ever supposed to be in software. I grew up in Suffolk, very much a working class background, and I was absolutely hell-bent on being a marine biologist. But some of you might cast your mind back to a certain period where there were university grants, which was something I was able to avail myself of. Student loans didn't exist until my second year at university, but it was something I really wanted to do. My parents had a lot of ambition for me. There's often talk in this world about underserved communities, but there's also underestimated communities, and I, as a child, was absolutely never underestimated. I got a job in the data processing department of the local factory in Felixstowe, and they seemed to like me, and I quite liked technology because my parents had bought me a ZX Spectrum, with a whole 48K of memory. They did the big one. I remember my dad queuing for it. So I was quite interested in that. And this company, you may have heard of it, it's Schlumberger. They said that they would sponsor me through university, which was amazing. It meant that I could absolutely go. That was the upside. The downside is that marine biology wasn't very useful to a business that made electricity meters. So they said, can you do something useful? I said, yeah. So I did computer science at university and answered an advert that Andrew Page wrote 30 years ago, just about, on the back page of the brilliantly named Computer Weekly magazine. I'm amazed it's never been on Have I Got News For You, because it's a riveting read. My then boss at Schlumberger taught me to read it from the back to the front, which is cartoons, jobs, and then content. So it's probably not the best culture for the first part of my my employment history, but I joined Alfa, then CHP Consulting, and the rest is history.
And it's so inspirational, I think, when you meet an entrepreneur, and you are an entrepreneur, you're not a founder, but you're not definitely an entrepreneur in terms of what you've done with Alfa, who's joined the ranks really early on and climbed their way up through them. So it's obviously a very long way from a graduate, a computer science grad joining the business, very junior, to eventually becoming CEO. Tell us in brief terms how that went.
Well, it's flown by, really. I was employee number 15. We are 508 now. It's probably changed since I read that statistic. It's a pretty fast-growing company. A thing about the way that we build the business, and there's recognizable DNA, a lot of recognizable DNA with the business today compared to the thing that I joined that was then called CHP Consulting back in the day. And one of the important things for us is that we're a business of practitioners. We don't have out-and-out straight-line salespeople. We have people who actually understand the business domain and have been at the sharp end of software engineering or the sharp end of systems deployment, and that's really important. So unbelievably, and my colleagues would definitely take the mickey out of me for it now, is I came in because of my technology prowess. I can assure any potential investors in the audience that there is not a jot of my code in the system today, but that's what I came in to do. And I did what a lot of people do at Alfa. I did software engineering. I did a bit of project management. I went to do some work at a subsidiary of what was then the Royal Bank of Scotland. And of course, noting that all tales get better with the telling. My tale is I went there to fix a printer, and for Alfa with CHP then was probably a 5 million turnover company. I came out having sold about 1 million of servicing, and Andrew Page said, you should be in sales. So did sales. I ran sales and marketing for a bit. I was chief operating officer for a bit. And next year I'll celebrate my 10 as chief exec.
Wow, what a story there. And I suppose it begs the question, and it made me laugh recently. You put a post on LinkedIn when you were celebrating your 30 years at Alfa. And you said that when you joined, Alfa ran on a thing that looked like a fridge with green and black character-based screens and was obviously focused almost exclusively on the UK. You said it only had 15 employees.
Right.
So when you look back on those 3 decades, what strikes you as having changed the most? And what have you tried to keep constant?
Yes, it's a really good question. It's like, how do you scale culture? What do you keep? What do you throw away, if anything? And back then, I think in my first 6 months of the company, I electrocuted one of our founders, changing a light bulb in the what we called the boardroom. It was a bit of a misnomer. And
the maintenance guy was not part of that.
Maintenance guy was not a skill either. There are things that I recognise. I was always taught back in the day to speak up. I was always taught the importance of communication. We tried to have little or no hierarchy. We tried to feel like a family. The idea of being a village all pulling in that same direction and helping each other. Quite reasonable for actually somebody to notionally work for somebody who is more junior than them. And our vision as an organisation is to have a small company feel and to have a big company impact. And impact for us is a very overloaded term. We try to have a really positive impact on the communities in which we work as well. So those are things that we've had to keep. But it gets harder. You have to be intentional to keep those cultural touchstones as you go forward, and you have to avoid siloing things like communication, like inclusion, like innovation. You have to see culture as a process, and particularly once you start to be truly international, things like values, if done really, really poorly, can be absolutely presentational. If done well, not only do you get these values, and it means that somebody in Asia Pac is making a decision looking through a lens that would be familiar to me, the journey is also important, actually going through that conversation in defining your values, thinking about what's important, thinking about what you need to scale and what you need to take forward. So I guess those are the important things in terms of how we scale the culture, keep the culture. And there has to be a word, I think, on leadership, because leadership is so important in preserving a culture. On one level, you can describe my job really easily, and honestly, it is the best job in the world. I have to make about 10 major decisions every year. I provide time and space for those people who I'm working with. Very much servant leadership. My job is to be an enabler, ask the right questions, but generally doing a lot of stuff like this, which is great, and spending a lot of time working with customers. But I think it's important to understand, as I'm sure people in the room do, is that leadership is also about role modeling, and it's about giving people permission. So everything that you do, good or bad, gives another person in the organization permission to act that way. If you cry at work, it gives people permission to cry at work if they're having a sad day, and that's really good for people to feel the freedom to do that. So that role modeling leadership is a really important, I think, device in scaling the culture. But I see everything back then, that encouragement to speak out. One of our values is challenge without being challenging around communications. Because we have so much trust within the organization, we have a leadership maxim of communicate early, if not imperfectly. So a lot of that stuff I recognize, but scaling it is hard.
Absolutely. And the bigger you get, the harder that gets, right? Yeah. So give us a couple of practical examples then, if you can, or a practical example of how you think about involving the family, if you like, all of those people within Alfa, and pulling and harnessing their power, for example, to innovate.
Right. So in innovation, I think the first important thing about innovation, and in common with a lot of things that are notionally C-suite roles, is that, as I said, let's not silo them. Innovation is not a thing that you can do at a point of time. We can't point a finger at somebody and say, go innovate. So we see innovation as a constant process. Of course we do. We're a software business, or software businesses that you consider, you certainly should look for that. But we also see innovation as a cultural touchstone. So as part of our innovation process, we have 2 innovation days in each territory every year, where we say to people, go and innovate what you like. And then we have hackathons. And we have a hackathon every year per major territory. Now, all of you in the audience might have a vision now of a hackathon of the thing that happened in, what was the film about Facebook? The Social Network. Very, very, very geeky, very, very software engineering-y. And yes, it is. Absolutely. We have some amazing product. In fact, a quick plug that the new version of our system, version 6, it has more new modules than we've ever had. And of the 10 new modules, 3 of them started their journey as hackathon projects. But we also see the hackathon as a way of including and involving. So it's not just a technical thing. Duncan, our CFO, I'm usually at this kind of thing riding alongside him. We've got a trading update tomorrow, so he's busy. But his team did a hack to improve our invoicing process. We had some people within the business that they went and did some good work in a mindfulness garden in Clerkenwell. So understanding that you can involve everybody in the hackathon, it's still innovation, because I get process improvement and I get new software and new technology, but it's also a brilliant way of bringing everybody together, celebrating the collaboration. So for that second time today, probably not the last, I'll say the journey is more important than the destination. The collaboration exercise, I'd probably do it if I didn't get any software, because it's such a great way of bringing everybody together.
And in terms of the value of that collaborative culture, I'm interested to make that link back to equity ownership, management equity ownership, but also extending throughout the organisation. Because for us in our investment process, the importance of management equity ownership is really paramount, as you've heard. I think we feel that it confers a lot of great attributes on a business in terms of long-term thinking about how to invest in the company, largely focusing on organic growth rather than acquisitive growth, nurturing the relationships both inside the organisation and externally, and growing your equity value, compounding over time. And I've heard you talk before about the decision to list the business on the stock exchange. Now, I mentioned that you and Andrew Page still have over half the equity between you. But I think I'm right in saying that one of the key drivers for that was actually to extend that equity ownership mentality down through the business as well.
Yeah, it was, to give you some context about Alfa as a business really quickly, we run at 97% retention. We touched 98% quite recently. People don't leave. We've actually had more Alfa returners than leavers full stop. And we don't pay at the top. We pay upper third quartile. So why is it that people stay? Now, obviously, it's that culture and that feeling of purpose are important, but it's also the things that you get from feeling a sense of ownership. And ownership isn't necessarily that tangible stuff in terms of equity. It's also feeling a sense of ownership with what the business is doing. We think in terms of getting everybody pointing in the right direction, getting everybody doing the things that they should be doing. We think alignment and understanding is really important. We pulse the business every 2 months, and one of the things that we ask the business is, do you feel that what you're doing is aligned with our corporate strategy? Do you understand the corporate strategy? I always have the feeling that a lot of people, when they do their annual report, they put together a new strategy. I'm not pointing any fingers, but there's a completely new thing that's there. I can promise you that the strategy section in Alfa's annual report is a lift and shift from our intranet. And if I change a word, the chief operating officer gets really upset with me, and we have to go back and we have to make sure that we're realigned. So alignment is super important, and equity is an important technique, I think, in getting alignment from the top down. Adrian Chamberlain is the non-exec who runs our Remco, and he has the easiest job in the world because neither Andrew nor I take a salary. Everything that we are able to achieve is aligned with our shareholders. And we wanted to get that feeling. There are other reasons why we're listed, but we wanted to get that feeling for the entire business. So listing gave us something that was really important as a remuneration tool, the ability to have shares that people could trade. Towards the top of the business, obviously we have LTIPs, and we have quite a broad radius of colleagues who are getting LTIPs. But we make sure that we do share matching. We make sure that we have people who are able to get, in a reasonably efficient way, access to the equity. And one of my favourite things within the business is when finance give me a list of all of the vesting LTIPs and what people have done with them. And overwhelmingly, they keep them, which is a huge and humbling endorsement of our overall leadership and where we're pointed as a business, and makes me very happy.
Absolutely. And I'll pick you up there on something you said about there being other reasons as well to list. And it's really important because I think there's this broad trope about the fact that there isn't very much tech here in the UK, that somehow, we're faced with an opportunity set as investors, which is very, very narrow. And there's a couple of points to pick up on there. First of all, was there another reason that you decided to list the business, which had to do with a tangible business advantage that you perceived that there was for Alfa from being listed on the stock market? And then I'm also interested to know what your perception is of the level below the listed market. How thriving is the UK tech scene?
Yes, it's interesting. And I've got to say, sometimes I do have my frustrations at the level of technology understanding in the UK market. I count myself fortunate that we are, because of the way our register works, it's very concentrated in towards the top, and Andrew and myself have obviously got a very big interest in the business. It means that we can have really close relationships, and our major shareholders are able to understand us. So we have a bit of an advantage. I think people do talk a lot about the downsides for a tech business in being listed. But for us, as well as that alignment and equity ownership, it gets you instant profile. And coming back to what we do as a business, we are, even though we're a fancy 250 listed business these days with all the countries and all the people, We are still a relatively small business dealing with very large businesses, Bank of America, Ford Motor Company, Mercedes-Benz, Wells Fargo, JPMC, Santander, and so on. And so when you're turning up at these boardrooms, I reckon I'm not bad at selling, but it's difficult to face off the question, how can we trust you? How can we trust your governance? How can we trust you'll be around? And genuinely, the London market is seen as governance gold standard by the whole world. So being listed on the London market pretty much makes that question go away, which is a fantastic advantage to us in business. And we were looking for it, and it's worked out.
Mm. And what about the rest of that scene then? Do you come across a lot of other inspirational, smaller businesses that potentially might be IPO candidates in due course?
Well, it's fine. You got away with it. There are lots of great technology businesses, and you talked about M&A, and our approach to M&A is probably not to do any, but we do like this idea of ecosystem. We like this idea of having lots and lots of smaller companies within our orbit that we can work with, and there's some phenomenal tech in the UK. We were always privately owned. We didn't borrow ever. And as Victoria said, we grew organically. So perhaps we're slightly different. I think the important thing within the market is just trying to have an understanding of tech. We very much point towards the idea of rule of 40 performance. We feel that's a thing that the market should be able to rely on us for. But understanding that actually a technology business, an innovation-based business, should be able to go forward and invest. And I think the broader markets and potentially the private equity markets, they can be a little bit short-term focus. I am investing this year, we're investing this year, and again, coming back to the fact we're 125 million sterling turnover business in a 3.5 billion market, we're investing in increasing our serviceable addressable market and our total addressable market. Why? Because I know I'm going to be here in 10 years and I don't want to have an existential crisis in 5 or 6 years. I think generally the financial sponsor regime and the listing regime could just do a slightly better job of understanding that we all want to think long term. And quick plug for these guys, it's great to have long-term investors on board.
Absolutely. Thank you for that plug. And I suppose I have to also, I mean, it's impossible, right, to talk to any technology business these days without covering the topic of artificial intelligence, AI, in the vein of whether or not it's an opportunity, a threat, both. You mentioned, the fact that you are very confident you'll be here in 10 years' time. What would you say to those people out there who might say enterprise software's dead? AI is going to kill all enterprise software businesses.
So let's see how many mobile phones I can set off right now. It's about, can it be described in a question? If I were in the business of apps that do your tax return, I would definitely be very, very concerned. You can say, here's my attempt at it, hey Siri, do my tax return. And you can see how that would work. There is no single question that could end up with a machine developing an alpha. It just doesn't work like that. It's too nuanced, too big, too complicated. There's also the thing that people don't talk about, although OpenAI is starting to talk about it a little bit. Victoria and I have this conversation again. If we do it, I hope we do one day, it will be different. Why will it be different? Because as humans, we are non-deterministic. AI is non-deterministic. So if a robot were creating another alpha, that's a problem, because if you're a major regulated entity, you can't have the situation where your invoicing process is different every time you ask for it. So that is a problem in the heart and lungs world that we live in. Of course, that's not to say that AI is not an amazing tool. It's an amazing tool that we use within engineering. It's an amazing tool that we use from a knowledge sharing perspective within our business. We automate using AI. Alfa has its own GPT. We have a large language conversational model called Thea, and Thea has managed to absorb everything that we know about our software. So you no longer need to use a manual. You could just ask Thea a question. And we try to do a lot of work in giving our customers access to AI, both within our software and within that ecosystem. It's a really, really powerful tool, not my job today to comment on the investability of AI, but I've certainly got my worries. But in terms of a tool that I can use to deliver software to my customers and to create operational leverage within my business, it's awesome. But I'm still going to be here in 10 years' time.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting case study, actually, of where, talking to a business that's actually actively using it today to improve efficiency, to become more productive, but also, and is embracing the change, but is also, healthily skeptical about its ability to fundamentally disrupt what you're doing. And I think when we had this conversation before, Andrew, you said to me, and it stuck in my mind, something like, when you're writing software, 90% of it is about the understanding the business domain, the questions, to your point. Only about 10% is actually the writing of the code. I thought that was a really nice way to think about it in terms of the importance of complexity, not just in depth, but also in breadth from the point of view of the software system.
It's that thing, isn't it? Is that AI can handle uncertainty, but it's not good at equivocality. Actually knowing what the question is that you need to ask in the first place. And humans are really good at that. But that's one of the reasons why when we look for engineers, job one is not to look for an engineer. What we're looking for is really fine minds with critical thinking capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we approach the end of our session here today, Andrew, I think it'd be really interesting. It's always really interesting to get a little bit into the background of the entrepreneurs running our businesses, because it's clearly a wonderful job. It's really interesting, but it comes with pressure. So how do you stay sane and grounded outside of work?
I've got a few interests which are varied. I really love my garden. I love gardening. My approach to, I suppose, self-love is I take something really heavy, I lift it up, I put it down again, and then I do it again. And I find I can really lose myself in the gym environment. I've been doing it a long time. I don't need to think about technique and so on. I DJ. I'm a 90s child, so I still do that. And I play hand percussion. I love my bongos, conga, and djembe and my cajoons. So I run a software company. I could be a bit rock and roll.
And what about the dogs? I thought you were going to tell me about the dogs.
Oh, the dogs are just family.
I love that. There was a new dog.
I have 3 dogs.
And 3 dogs, yeah. Absolutely love getting out and about in nature. And then a final question for you, if I may, which I ask all the guests that I have onto the podcast, which is, what would you say if I gave you the opportunity to exchange places with one other person in one other career, just for a day? Who would you like to be for the day and why?
It's a tricky old question, that, isn't it? Because you start with thinking about heroes. I'd love to be Lewis Hamilton for the day. I'd probably stack it. He's stacking it a lot at the moment. So that's maybe the easy train tracks answer. I would like to be somebody more junior within the company. It's the Rabbie Burns line, our gift the gifty gay is to see ourselves as others see us. I would love to be somebody looking at my style of leadership to see if I'm all that, I suppose, and to be able to look at me through their eyes. So, yeah, that's what I'd do.
We get a lot of different answers to that question. It's not one I think I've had before. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us today and giving us all those insights. And thanks so much to the audience.
I really hope you enjoyed the live format of that episode. And if you did like what you heard, we'd be so grateful if you consider giving us a follow or subscribing to the series on Spotify, Apple, or your usual podcast provider. And as always, please remember that nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment advice or a solicitation to purchase securities in any company or investment product mentioned. We'll see you next time.